something just happened. Someone in your life, someone who said they loved you, someone who told you they believed in you, just made you feel small for becoming more. You didn't imagine it. You felt it. That strange tension in the room when you shared something good about yourself. That shift in their energy when you mentioned a goal you were working toward. That quiet coldness that replaced what used to feel like warmth. That subtle way they found to minimize what you were building. Dressed up as concern, dressed up as honesty, dressed up as love. And the worst part, you almost believed them. You almost shrank back. You almost apologized for growing. This is not a story about enemies. This is not a story about people who hate you. This is a story about something far more complicated, far more painful, and far more common than anyone is willing to admit. This is a story about the people who cheer for you, right up until the moment you actually start to become someone. There is an old story, simple on the surface, but if you really sit with it, if you really let it land, it changes the way you understand every relationship you have ever been in. A young monk had been studying for many years in a small monastery nestled in the mountains. He was quiet, devoted, humble, and all the other monks loved him. They would eat together in the mornings, walk in the gardens at midday, and study side by side through the long evenings. There was a beautiful harmony in their days, a beautiful sameness. And then, one season, something began to shift. The young monk started waking before the others, not because he was told to, not because the rules required it, but because something inside him had awakened that could not go back to sleep. He would sit in the cold silence before dawn and meditate until the light crept over the mountains. He began to ask questions the others had stopped asking years ago. Not disruptive questions, not arrogant questions, just deeper ones. Questions that went further into the silence than the others were comfortable going. And slowly, almost invisibly, the harmony changed. The other monks still smiled at him. They still sat beside him at meals, but something underneath the smiling had shifted. There was a new energy in the room when he spoke, a subtle tension, a quiet distance that hadn't been there before. And sometimes, when he would share what he had discovered in his early morning practice, he would catch something in their eyes, not malice, nothing so simple as malice. It was something else, something older, something that lives in every human heart and almost no one speaks about honestly. His teacher noticed. Old teachers always notice. One afternoon, the teacher called the young monk to walk with him through the garden. They walked in silence for a long time. The old man said nothing, just walked. The sound of their feet on the stone path, the distant sound of wind in the trees. And then the teacher stopped and looked at the young monk directly. He said, "You have not done anything wrong, but you are no longer the same. And the ones who love the person you were are grieving the loss of that person. They do not know this yet. They may never know it. But that is what is happening. Their discomfort is not about you. It is about what your changing asks of them." The young monk was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "So what do I do? Do I slow down? Do I go back?" And the teacher looked at him with eyes full of something that could not quite be called sadness and could not quite be called peace, but was somewhere between the two. He said, "You cannot go back. And the kindest thing you can do for them and for yourself is to understand what is actually happening. Not to judge it, not to fight it, just to see it clearly, because what is happening is not cruelty. It is very, very human." That young monk is not the point of this story. You are. Because this is not an ancient parable happening somewhere far away in a mountain monastery. This is your life, right now. Maybe not in a monastery, maybe in your family home, at your workplace, in your group of friends, inside your closest relationships, but the structure is identical. And the feeling, that strange, disorienting, almost guilty feeling you get when you start to outgrow the people around you, That feeling is one of the least talked about and most universally experienced forms of human suffering. Let's talk about it honestly. When you are the same as the people around you, life is comfortable. There is a word for this comfort. In psychology, it is called homeostasis. Systems, including social systems, tend toward equilibrium. They tend toward sameness. They tend toward a stable state where everyone knows their role and no one deviates too far from the expected. And this is not entirely a bad thing. There is real warmth in shared sameness, real belonging, real safety. But what happens when one person inside that system begins to change? What happens when you begin to wake up, to work differently, to think differently, to want different things, and ask different questions, and carry yourself in a way that no longer fits neatly into the role everyone had assigned to you? The system, and by the system I mean the people in your life, begin to experience something they often cannot name, a kind of internal alarm, an unconscious recognition that the equilibrium is shifting. And because human beings are deeply, profoundly oriented toward maintaining social stability, especially in groups where identity and belonging have become intertwined, they will often, without realizing it, begin to apply pressure. Not aggressive pressure, not violent pressure, quiet pressure, subtle pressure. The kind of pressure that makes you question whether you are the problem. You know what this pressure looks like. It looks like the comment about how you have changed, said with just enough edge that it is not quite a compliment and not quite an accusation. It looks like the joke at your expense that everyone laughs at, and the moment you don't laugh, they say you have become too serious. It looks like the person who used to celebrate every win you had, suddenly finding reasons why your wins aren't as impressive as they seem. Maybe the timing was lucky. Maybe you had help. Maybe you are getting ahead of yourself. It looks like conversations where you share something you are genuinely excited about and you feel the energy in the room go flat, like trying to light a match in the rain. It looks like the sudden excess of unsolicited advice about the risks of what you are doing from the very people who never once took a risk themselves. It looks like being loved conditionally, loved for who you were, watched suspiciously for who you are becoming. And the truly difficult part, the part that makes this so confusing to navigate, is that none of these people are necessarily bad people. Most of them genuinely care about you. Most of them believe they are helping you. Most of them are completely unconscious of the mechanism that is actually driving their behavior. Here is the mechanism. When you grow, when you genuinely begin to evolve as a person, you become, without intending to, a mirror. And some people cannot stand to look in that mirror. Your discipline reflects their lack of discipline. Your courage reflects their avoidance. Your willingness to change reflects their attachment to staying the same. Your belief in yourself reflects the deep ambivalence they feel about themselves. And none of this is comfortable. None of this is easy to sit with. So instead of sitting with it, instead of turning toward their own reflection and asking hard questions, they turn toward you and they apply pressure, not because they want you to fail, but because your success, your growth, your becoming is doing something to them internally that they do not know how to process. This is the hidden architecture of what feels like betrayal. This is why the people who cheer loudest for you in your mediocrity can become the quietest or the most quietly undermining when you start to actually rise. The Buddha spoke about this, not in these exact words, but in teachings that arrive at the same truth through a different door. He spoke about the nature of attachment, not just attachment to things or to outcomes, but attachment to people as fixed, unchanging objects. One of the deepest sources of suffering, according to the Buddha, is the demand we place on people and on ourselves to remain static, to stay the same, to continue being whoever it was comfortable for us to be. When we love someone, we often love the version of them we first knew, the version that fit our world in a particular way, the version that did not challenge us, did not ask us to expand, did not make us face the parts of ourselves we had worked hard to avoid. And when that person begins to grow beyond that version, when they start to become someone more than what we expected, we grieve. We grieve the familiar version of them, and sometimes, without knowing it, we try to resurrect them. We try to pull them back into the shape we preferred. We call it concern. We call it advice. We call it just being honest with you. But underneath all of those words, what is actually happening is grief. And grief, when it goes unnamed, becomes control. I want you to hear something. The people applying this pressure in your life, they are not monsters. They are people in pain. They are people who have not yet done the work you are doing, or who started doing it and stopped, or who are afraid of what it would cost them to begin. And seeing you do it anyway, seeing you choose growth even when it is uncomfortable, even when it costs you, activates something in them that they have been carefully, unconsciously avoiding. You are not wrong for growing. You are not arrogant for becoming more. You are not betraying anyone by refusing to stay small. But you are going to feel like you are? That is the trap. That is the particular cruelty of this dynamic. Because the pressure is so gentle, so well dressed in the language of love and concern, that you start to absorb it. You start to think, maybe I am being too much. Maybe I am moving too fast. Maybe they are right and I am wrong. Maybe who I was becoming was just ego and this is reality calling me back. And that is the moment when so many people stop, not because they are weak, but because the social cost of continuing feels unbearably high. Let me tell you about the second monk in that story, the one who is never mentioned. There was another young monk in the same monastery. He had started the same way, the same devotion, the same curiosity, the same fire in his early practice. But somewhere along the way, somewhere in those long years of sitting inside the approval of the group, he made a quiet, unconscious choice. He chose belonging over becoming. He learned to ask only the questions the others were comfortable with. He learned to practice only as much as kept him safely within the circle of what was admired but not threatening. He learned to shrink the edges of his growth just enough that no one ever felt unsettled by him. And the others loved him for it. They were comfortable around him. They said he was grounded. They said he was wise in a humble way. They said he had good perspective. But in his private moments, in the silence before dawn when no one else was watching, he knew what he had traded. He knew the cost of being loved for staying small. And some mornings, when the other monk would return from his early practice with something new alive in his eyes, the second monk would feel it. That mixture of admiration and resentment, that complicated love that wants to celebrate and diminish in the same breath. He was not a bad person. He was a person who had made a deeply human choice, and he was quietly, privately, in pain because of it. You have to understand something about the people who pull at you when you grow. In many cases, they are not your enemies. In many cases, they are the second monk. They are people who made the choice to stay. Maybe consciously, maybe not. Maybe they encountered the same crossroads you are at now and chose the comfort of belonging over the discomfort of becoming, and now, watching you choose differently, they feel the echo of their own unrealized potential. And that echo is uncomfortable, and they do not always have the self-awareness to recognize where the discomfort is really coming from. So it comes out as pressure on you. It comes out as subtle undermining. It comes out as jokes and comments and a coolness in the room when you talk about your work, your progress, your becoming. And knowing this, truly knowing this, changes how you respond to it, because you can hold it with compassion instead of resentment. You can understand what is happening without absorbing it. You can love them, genuinely love them, without letting their unprocessed grief become the ceiling of your life. But you also have to be honest about something harder. Compassion does not mean staying in proximity to people whose unprocessed pain is actively working against your growth. Understanding why someone is doing something does not obligate you to remain within its radius. There is a kind of spiritual bypassing that sounds humble, but is actually a form of self-abandonment. It goes like this: I understand they are in pain. I understand this is a mirror thing. I understand they don't mean harm, so I will stay, so I will shrink, so I will continue to make myself smaller in the name of compassion. That is not compassion. That is confusing self-sacrifice with kindness. True compassion, the deep, clear-eyed compassion that the Buddha was actually pointing toward, does not require you to destroy yourself to make others comfortable. True compassion sees clearly. It understands the mechanism. It holds the person with warmth. And it also firmly, quietly, without cruelty, maintains the truth of who you are and who you are becoming. You can love someone and need distance from them. You can wish someone well and need to walk a different road. You can hold someone with warmth and still refuse to be held back by them. These are not contradictions. These are the actions of someone who has learned to love both themselves and others with the same honesty. Here is what the actual shift looks like when it happens inside you. You stop needing them to understand. This sounds simple. It is not simple, because for most of us, the need to be understood by the people we love runs incredibly deep. We want them to see us. We want them to recognize what we are doing and why. We want the approval of our original community even as we are outgrowing it. And that need, that very human, very understandable need, is what makes the dynamic so painful for so long. Because they often cannot see it. Not because they are stupid, not because they don't love you, but because what you are doing requires a language they haven't learned yet. It requires a way of seeing that is only available on the other side of a door they haven't walked through. And you cannot explain what is on the other side of that door to someone who has not walked through it. You can describe it, you can gesture toward it, but the felt understanding only comes from the walk. So there is a moment, a quiet, sometimes devastating, sometimes liberating moment, when you stop waiting for them to get it, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop auditing your growth through their eyes, when you realize that their discomfort with who you are becoming is information about where they are, not a verdict about where you should be. That moment is the beginning of real freedom. And then something else happens. It happens slowly. It does not announce itself. But if you are paying attention, you will notice it. You begin to find your people. Not the people who love you for staying the same, but the people who are also in motion, the people who are also in the middle of their own becoming, the people who do not require you to apologize for your growth because they are too busy growing themselves to feel threatened by yours. These people exist. They are sometimes not where you would expect to find them. They are sometimes on the other side of a conversation you were almost too afraid to begin. They are sometimes in spaces you haven't entered yet because entering them would require you to accept that you have already outgrown the old ones. But they are there, and the energy of connection with them, the specific, unmistakable feeling of being around people who celebrate your becoming, rather than quietly resist it, will be unlike anything you have felt in the rooms you have been trying too hard to stay comfortable in. It is not that the old connections are valueless. Some of them will survive your growth. Some of the people who currently feel unsettled by who you are becoming will do their own work and meet you on the other side. Some relationships are elastic enough to stretch and not break. But you cannot know which ones are until you stop contracting yourself to protect them all. There is one more thing the old teacher said to the young monk. It is the part of the story that is hardest to hear and most necessary to remember. The monk asked, "Will it always feel this lonely?" And the teacher was quiet for a moment, not avoiding the question, just holding it with the weight it deserved. Then he said, "The loneliness you feel now is not the loneliness of loss. It is the loneliness of transition. There is a space between who you were and who you are becoming where very few people can stand beside you. not because you are doing something wrong, but because that space is not visible from the outside. It can only be inhabited, and most people choose not to inhabit it. They choose the shore. He paused, and then he said something that the young monk carried for the rest of his life. The ones who matter will find you on the other side, but you have to cross first. You cannot wait for company to begin the crossing. You cannot cross on behalf of anyone but yourself, and you cannot cross halfway and call it done. The crossing itself is the teaching. The loneliness itself is the transformation. Do not rush through it. Do not try to escape it. Let it do what it came to do. You are in the crossing right now. Maybe you have been in it for months, maybe for years. Maybe you have only just realized that the restlessness you have been feeling is not a problem to be solved, but a direction to be followed. And the people in your life who grew louder or colder or more confusing as you changed, they are not proof that you are wrong. They are evidence that the crossing is real, that something genuine is happening, that the person you are becoming is not the same as the person they knew. And that gap, that beautiful, terrifying gap, is not a mistake. It is the work. Growth does not ask permission. It does not send advance notice to the people who are comfortable with your smallness. It does not negotiate with your fear. It does not wait until you have arranged the approval of everyone in your circle before it moves through you. It simply moves, and your only real choice, again and again, at every stage of your becoming, is whether to move with it or against it. The ones who moved with it, who said yes to the restlessness even when saying yes cost them the comfort of being universally approved of, they are the ones who eventually look back and understand what the loneliness was for. They are the ones who stopped apologizing for their light. They crossed, and on the other side, though it looked like loss for a long time, was everything they were actually looking for. Right now, in this moment, there is a version of you that is pulling at you from the future, not speaking in loud declarations, not making grand promises, just quietly, persistently, unmistakably calling you forward. And there are voices behind you, well-meaning, familiar, beloved voices, saying, "Come back, stay, don't change so much. We liked who you were." You know which voice to follow. You have always known. The question was never about knowing. The question was about whether you were willing to feel the grief of leaving the shore and walk toward the water anyway. Even now, as you sit with this, something in you has already shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. The way all real things shift. Did you feel it?